Well, by now you've heard that the FDA has updated their healthy claim on food labels. It only took them 30 years, but let's look at this new press release from December 19th of 2024. This is according to our own FDA. The FDA updates healthy claim, providing a refreshed tool for consumers. Today, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration is announcing a final rule to update the definition of the nutrient content claim healthy. There's an ever-growing crisis of preventable diet-related chronic diseases in the U.S. that requires immediate action, they say. The updated healthy claim marks an important step in fulfilling the FDA's nutrition priorities, which are part of a whole government approach to address this crisis. This rule will help ensure that consumers have access to more complete, accurate, and up-to-date nutrition information on food labels. All right, so you might wonder, well, what did the old label look like? I mean, I don't even remember seeing any FDA. I mean, I know it's the Food and Drug Administration. I think it is curious, needless to say, there was a press release on the 23rd of 2021, where the COVID-19 immunization was very quickly approved, but it took them 30 years to update food labels. That's interesting because, as you know, in the last 30 years, well, definitely the last 60 years, our health has gone as a society in the wrong direction. The obesity epidemic is now affecting children. We used to hear about adult onset diabetes because type 2 diabetes generally was relegated to adults. Now we're seeing children, unfortunately, sadly, with type 2 diabetes. And so here's the old foods that were qualified. And this hasn't been updated since the 1990s. Like, my friends, this is that was a long time ago, 30 years. They've been, these foods qualified under the FDA's healthy food claim. This is absurd. We have white bread. We have yogurt that was high in added sugars. It took the FDA 30 years to figure this out. Cereal, fortified breakfast cereal that is high in added sugars food manufacturers were able to put the healthy food claim on this. This is absurd. Snack bars that were high in added sugars, fortified juice, fruit punch. Okay. So this is absurd. So basically sugar everywhere. Now, I know I'm going to get some blowback for saying this, but it's very political, obviously. I mean, these people, they're threatened by RFK. You can say what you want about RFK. Oh my God, he's anti-vaxxer. Oh, he's an attorney. What does he know about health? Obviously, he has made it very clear in the podcast that he's been on, and what he said is that we are going to shake the tree. We're gonna come poke the bear. Okay, NIH, CDC, FDA, we're coming for you because we have a chronic health epidemic here going on, and no one's seemingly doing anything about it. And all of a sudden, we're seeing these institutions starting to make these changes, right? The FDA is making changes on the healthy label claim. There's been other changes with the NIH and so forth. I'm sure we're going to see changes with the dietary guidelines changes and so on. So I think this is all good news, friends. I would love to know what you think. Before we continue and dive into this, let me know what you think of this video by hitting that like button and leave me a comment in the comment section. We're going to dive further into the FDA's, what they consider healthy and some of the new shifts. I think this is quite interesting, but I want to thank our show sponsor, BondCharge. BondCharge is the maker of an array of health promoting tools, but one of my favorites, especially during the winter, is their infrared sauna blanket. It's amazing because it has a very small form factor. You can travel with this. If you have a studio, a flat, a condo, you don't need a big space for an infrared sauna. You can roll this out on your carpet, on your hardwood floor, and get really hot. What's cool about this sauna blanket is it gets up to 170 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's known to be one of the lowest EMF sauna blankets on the market. So you can get really hot, you can sweat. It's good for relaxing, before bed. If you do a cold plunge in the morning, you can warm up in the sauna blanket. There's so many different applications, but what I like about it is it's really relaxing. So afterwards, you feel really calm. And we know there's tons of health benefits linked to regularly getting hot on purpose. It mimics the effect of exercise. There's detoxification. I mean, there's a lot of benefits. So I would like you to be able to take advantage of some of those benefits by going to bondcharge.com/HIH, where you can save on a bunch of health tools. I have their blackout sleep mask. I have their blue light filtering glasses. I've been using BondCharge products for a long time, but their sauna blanket is amazing. So definitely check that out. I'll put links in the description below. Okay, so getting back to these updates. I think this is all good stuff. The FDA is finally doing their job. I mean, it took, unfortunately, and I know, these statistics, we've shared with you this data right here, trends and disparities in cardiometabolic health among U.S. adults. This is using our own epidemiological data set, the so-called NHANES data set from 1999 to 2018. Essentially what this report finds is 93.2% of U.S. adults are unhealthy metabolically speaking, right? From a cardiometabolic standpoint, high blood pressure, high visceral adipose tissue, changes in triglycerides, things are not going in the right direction. But we've known this for a long time, right? We've seen the statistics come out about overweight and obesity. We see the surge on Ozempic, that interest really shows that people, want to reduce body fat, right? And it just now in 2024, at the end of 2024, the FDA says, oh yeah, we're going to take the healthy label claim off junk food, fruit juices, and all these junk foods. So I think this is really interesting because the own commissioner here, this is the FDA Deputy Commissioner for Human Foods, Jim Jones, says food labeling can be a powerful tool for change. Food labeling, like healthy, may help foster a healthier food supply if manufacturers choose to reformulate their products to meet this new definition, which I think is great. And he says there's an opportunity for industry and others to join us in making healthy a ubiquitous, quick signal to help people more easily build nutritious diets. I think that's awesome. I mean, even more amazing would be that people just don't buy foods with labels on them in the first place. Just make your food from scratch. But, I understand that not everyone's going to do that. And so the FDA commissioner says it's critical for the health of our country that food be a vehicle for wellness. Improving access to nutrition information is an important public health effort that the FDA can undertake to help people build healthy eating patterns. He goes on to say it is vital that we focus on the key drivers to combat chronic disease, like healthy eating. Now, people will be able to look for the healthy claim to help them find foundational, nutritious foods for themselves and their families. I wholeheartedly agree with everything that he said there. I think this is really important. My only question here is why did it take 30 years? You know what I mean? There's a couple things to unpack with this, right? A lot of people from Europe and Canada trash our healthcare system. They're like, oh my gosh, healthcare is so bad in America. Why can it be like the NHS, in the UK or like Health Canada? And any government-run healthcare system any government-run agency is completely inefficient. And so is the FDA literally this inefficient that it took them like almost 32 years to update these food labels, to change things so that, high sugary breakfast cereals and white bread and so forth weren't still labeled as healthy? Or is it political? We'll never really know. But I think, a lot of people they think that the government controlled things are going to be so much better, and I understand that we have our healthcare problems here in the U.S., right? But in other countries, healthcare is really, really slow because it's often run by the government, and so we need to stop, sort of putting our government on a pedestal and just realize that we need to take things into our own, action and have some agency over our health. And that starts with nutrition. And so I do think it's important that the FDA updated things. And of course, they're villainizing saturated fat again. It's the devil. So we need to limit saturated fat. Guys, we've been beating this drum since the late 1950s, early 1960s. I've shared with you heart disease statistics. I mean, if saturated fat was killing people, why doesn't the data reflect that? And what's interesting is in their own sourcing, they have a handout. I'll put it in the description below. There's this figure 1-11. It shows the evil saturated fat from all this red meat. Oh, wait. Red meat is only contributing to 4% of the saturated fat intake. In Americans, you're like, wow, that's weird. Oh, it must be the eggs. Oh no, eggs are only contributing to about 3% of the intake of saturated fat. You're like, well, where's it coming from? The biggest bubble, as you can see, is sandwiches. So it's like, where's that? What, from processed deli meats, or is it the margarine? I'm not sure. There's these little diagrams. It's a little circuitous how you actually get to this, but desserts and sweet snacks account for 11% of the intake of saturated fat. Chips, savory snacks, 4%. So again, if we're going to blame red meat and all this for all the saturated fat that's supposedly killing people and clogging arteries, then we actually have to give equal weight to villainize chips and savory snacks and so forth, because they contribute to 4% of the daily intake of saturated fats. I just think it's really interesting that sandwiches, and I'm sure the saturated fats is not in the bread, but it could be the low quality deli meats or something like that. But anyway, this report is still trashing saturated fat. And then they have this other visual here where they highlight the typical unhealthy eating pattern to the healthier foods that they recommend. And we see butter, and this is where it gets interesting. So you see butter in the typical, butter's conveniently right next to soda, right? And then in the healthy diagram, as you can see, you have your good old vegetable oil and sparkling water, right? So they're trying to say that, butter is really unhealthy. Our health experts have been going after butter since the late 1950s, since Ansel Keys was going around doing his 7-country study and so forth. All you have to do is look at the statistics, my friends. We're not doing good on the heart disease front, and people are eating I've shared with you the data. Butter consumption over the past 130 years is way down. Vegetable oil consumption is way up. Clearly, we're doing something wrong. So they go on to recommend, that we follow the intakes per our food guidelines, and that's about 27 grams of vegetable oil per day. 27 grams, that's quite significant if you think about it, about 12% of calories coming from oils. Now, I know this is controversial. They do clump olive oil in addition to canola and sunflower and cottonseed and all these other oils, soybean oil. They even say corn oil is acceptable. I agree with them here. We shouldn't be having fruit with added sugars. So they say plain low fat fruit. I'm not a fan of low fat. I mean, low fat milk, low fat fruit. Why are we still even making these food items? Anyhow, so examples of foods that qualify under the healthy eating claim. You can see these things. So we have salmon. Okay. The thing about salmon, though, what I think is interesting is there's no reference on whether or not this should be farm raised or wild caught. We know that farm raised salmon eating corn, soybean, and grains, they have the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio that's worse than like chicken, right? So we need to think about how the food that we're eating, what they ate, and how that impacts us. There's a great book called What Your Food Ate. Excellent book by David Montgomery and Ann Bickley. They're out of Seattle, Washington. I actually have reached out to them to get on the podcast. Really interesting book, how they talk about how actually grass-fed pasture-raised beef has more omega-3s than some wild-caught fish on a per gram basis. So we really need to be considering, like, if we're going to eat fish, well, how was that fish raised? I mean, not to be too Portlandia, but, if we're eating farm-raised salmon that are fed corn and soybeans, why would we think that that is somehow healthier than a pasture-raised ruminant animal that is converting all the phytochemically rich grass and so forth and ruminating that in their rumen and converting that into edible protein for us with healthy fats, in that. Much different regeneratively raised cattle. It's a different phenotype compared to feedlot cattle. And they talk about that in the book and talk about how farm fish is really not that healthy. So I think that's really important. They say 100% olive oil is healthy, which I agree. It's cool to see the FDA highlight eggs. It's funny. On the one hand, they talk about how saturated fat's bad, and presumably they also believe that dietary cholesterol is bad, although they don't explicitly say that. But then we have eggs here, which I think is good. Sadly, they do say plain low fat or fat-free yogurt. So it's a lot of the same, right? We're hearing like low fat and so on. So that's it for the report. What do you think about this? I really do hope that we stop blaming butter and saturated fat for the diseases caused by, fried foods and sugar and ultra-processed carbohydrates and refined seed oils. I mean, we know that we're consuming those things in orders of magnitude more, relatively speaking, compared to butter and full-fat yogurt and things like that. So I would love to know what you think in the comment section, my friends. Thanks for tuning all the way through. I'm grateful that you are still here. Thanks for hitting that like button, and we'll see you in a future video down the road.